Ladies and gentlemen, there is something silently standing in the way of your success. It's not the economy. It's not your background. It's not luck. It's you. Specifically, your paradigm. You've been programmed since birth with ideas that don't belong to you, beliefs about money, work, and your potential. They control your actions, limit your results, and dictate your life. Success isn't about trying harder. It's about thinking differently. Shift the paradigm and you shift your world. Don't fight circumstances. Change the conditioning. That's the key. The first and most vital step toward true success is to identify and break your limiting paradigms. A paradigm is a mental program that has almost exclusive control over your habitual behavior. And since almost all behavior is habitual, your paradigm controls the majority of your results. You may have goals, ambitions, and dreams, but unless your paradigm supports those outcomes, you will always find yourself stuck in a cycle of frustration, making small changes but never seeing lasting progress. You may think you're making decisions freely, but in reality, you're operating under mental programs installed in you through repetition, environment, and inherited beliefs. The dangerous thing about paradigms is how invisible they are. You can't see them, and yet they affect every area of your life. Think of a thermostat set to 72 degrees. You might open a window or turn on the heater, but eventually the room will go back to 72. Your paradigm works the same way. It pulls you back to the settings you've been conditioned to operate within. You can get a new job, start a new business, or try to change your habits, but without shifting the paradigm, you'll revert to the same outcomes because the internal setting hasn't changed. Paradigms are formed through your environment, school, family, and repeated experiences. If you were told money is hard to earn, that success is only for a select few, or that you're not the type to achieve great things, those ideas lodge in your subconscious mind and become part of the program. Even if you logically know better, those ideas will pull the strings. This is why so many people attend seminars, read books, and set goals, but still feel stuck. The conscious mind is active and wants change, but the paradigm running the subconscious has not shifted. The real power lies in your subconscious programming. To change the paradigm, you must first identify it. Pay close attention to the areas of your life where you feel stuck or where the same patterns repeat. It might be in finances, relationships, confidence, or health. Ask yourself, what beliefs do I hold in this area? Where did they come from? Are they serving me? This awareness is the first crack in the shell. Most people never stop to question their programming. They operate on autopilot, blaming circumstances, other people, or luck. But once you recognize that your paradigm is the true culprit, you regain power. You can identify paradigms by observing your results. Your income, habits, confidence, and achievements are not determined by your potential. They're determined by your conditioning. If you're earning the same income year after year, it's not because that's all you're worth. It's because your internal thermostat is set to that amount. If you consistently procrastinate, self-sabotage, or hesitate when opportunity knocks, it's not due to laziness or fear. It's your paradigm protecting its familiar setting. It doesn't care if you're happy. It only cares if things stay the same. Once you've identified the paradigm, breaking it requires conscious repetition of new ideas. The subconscious mind doesn't respond to logic or reason. It responds to emotion and repetition. This means feeding your mind with the ideas you want to live by over and over again. Until they become the new programming, you must emotionally get involved with the belief that you can succeed, that abundance is natural, that confidence is within you. Write affirmations. Visualize success. Surround yourself with environments and people who reflect your desired paradigm. It's not enough to know what you want. You must saturate your mind with it. Changing a paradigm isn't instant, but it is possible. You're not a victim of your past. You're not bound by what you've been taught, but you must be relentless in replacing old patterns. Every time you act in a way that reflects the new paradigm, you weaken the grip of the old one. Every time you notice a limiting belief and choose not to obey it, you're creating a new groove in your mind. This is inner work. It doesn't make noise, but it moves mountains. Too often, people try to change their outer world without changing their inner world. They switch jobs, move cities, end relationships, but still carry the same limiting paradigms. The results stay the same because they've never altered the root cause. If you want to elevate your life, your business, your relationships, start with the paradigm. It controls your perception, and your perception creates your reality. You're not seeing the world as it is. You're seeing it as your paradigm filters it. And until you change that lens, everything outside you will mirror the old internal structure. The power lies in decision. You can decide to no longer accept your current programming. You can decide to rewrite your mental blueprint. And you can do it without knowing how everything will happen. The how, will begin to reveal itself as your vibration changes. What once seemed out of reach will start showing up, not because the world changed, but because you did. You must act like the person you want to become. Think like them, speak like them, make decisions like them. That is how you signal to your subconscious that it's time to build a new paradigm. Success starts in the mind, not in effort. This statement challenges the way most people have been conditioned to think. We've been taught that hard work, grinding, hustle, and nonstop action are the keys to achieving success. And while effort does play a role, it is not the foundation. The foundation is thought. Everything you see, touch, experience, every result you've ever had originated first in the mind. The chair you're sitting on was first a thought in someone's mind. The phone in your hand, the home you live in, the career you're building, it all started as an idea. That means if you want different results, you don't begin with action. You begin with thinking. The mind operates on frequencies. Your thoughts are energy, and that energy sets the tone for what you attract, how you feel, what actions you're willing to take, and ultimately what outcomes you experience. Most people focus entirely on the physical plane. They measure success by what they do, but the real power is in the mental and emotional planes. The truth is, two people can put in the exact same amount of effort and get drastically different results. Why? Because their thinking isn't the same. One person may be filled with doubt, fear, and worry. The other is aligned with purpose, belief, and vision. Same hours, same actions, different outcomes. That's the mind at work. You cannot outperform your self-image. If you believe you're worth little, that belief will sabotage even the most intense efforts. You'll hesitate, procrastinate, shrink when it's time to expand. That's why so many people who try to work harder burn out. They're using willpower to fight against their own self-concept. They're trying to do something they don't believe they're worthy of. The subconscious mind is far more powerful than willpower. Until your belief matches your desire, effort alone won't carry you to success. You must first see yourself as successful. You must mentally claim the identity of the person who lives the life you want. This is why visualization is not a game, it's a tool. When you visualize yourself achieving your goals, you're not daydreaming. You're giving your mind new instructions. You're building a new internal image, and that image begins to reshape your outer world. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what is vividly imagined and what is real. So if you repeatedly and emotionally picture your success, your mind begins to accept it as your truth. From there, your behavior begins to shift. You act differently, speak differently, take risks you wouldn't have taken before, all because your mind has accepted a new identity. Most people think circumstances control their success. They believe they need better resources, a better economy, a better background. But in reality, the only thing they need is better thinking. Thoughts are causes, conditions are effects. If you want to change the condition, you change the thought that created it. That's why success doesn't start in the gym, the office, or the classroom. It starts in the mind. If your internal conversation is rooted in doubt, fear, and scarcity, that's what your external results will reflect. You can't escape it. The outside is always a reflection of the inside. Affirmations play a powerful role here. They're not just words. They're declarations to the subconscious. When spoken with emotion and repetition, they begin to shift your mental blueprint. Saying things like, I am confident, I am abundant, or success flows to me isn't just positive thinking, it's conscious reprogramming. You're feeding your mind new instructions to override the old paradigm. And when you do this consistently, your actions start to align with those new thoughts, and your results begin to change. Fear is a major blocker in this process. Most people allow fear to dictate thinking. They visualize failure. They anticipate problems. They imagine worst-case scenarios. And then they're surprised when those fears manifest. But the mind doesn't distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It just responds to your dominant thoughts. So if you're constantly feeding it images of what you don't want, you're programming it to produce those results. The key is to discipline your mind to focus on what you do want. Even in the face of uncertainty, you don't need to know every step of the journey before you begin. That's another trap people fall into. They think, I'll believe in success once I see how it's going to happen. But it doesn't work that way. The mind works on faith, not certainty. You must first believe, and then the path begins to reveal itself. When you decide in your mind that success is yours, and you hold to that vision with persistence, resources and opportunities begin to appear. People call it coincidence or luck, but it's not. It's the law of vibration responding to your mental frequency. You can't escape this law. It's always operating. Whether you're aware of it or not, your thoughts are sending out a frequency, and the universe is responding to that frequency. That's why thinking from success, not about it, is so powerful. When you think from success, you're mentally living in the end result. You're being the person who already has the outcome. And when you operate from that space, you naturally make decisions that align with your vision. Your energy changes, your presence changes, and the world responds to that new vibration. This isn't about ignoring action. Action is essential, but the kind of action you take, the quality, the boldness, the creativity, comes from your thinking. Right thinking leads to right action. When your mind is saturated with belief, purpose, and vision, you take inspired action. And inspired action produces quantum results. This is different from forced action, where you're pushing and grinding without alignment. That kind of effort leads to burnout, not breakthrough. Your current reality is a printout of your past thinking. If you don't like the results, you don't change them by pushing harder. You change them by thinking better. Ask yourself, what do I believe about success? What stories am I repeating in my mind every day? What images am I holding in my imagination? Are they empowering or limiting? Because those thoughts are shaping your future whether you realize it or not. The mind is a fertile garden. You can plant seeds of prosperity, confidence, joy, or you can let weeds of fear, doubt, and negativity grow. Either way, something is growing. You decide what that is by the thoughts you choose to dwell on. The secret that the most successful people understand is that success is first won in the invisible world. They build the image. They feel the result. They live it internally before it ever becomes physical. That's why they move with such certainty. They're not reacting to what is. They're responding to what they've already seen in their mind. That mental victory is what pulls the physical success into their experience. Your results reflect your internal programming. This truth, though simple, holds profound power over every area of your life. Most people spend their time trying to change results, working harder, taking more action, changing jobs, moving locations, but they never stop to examine the source of those results, their internal programming. Every result you see, from your income to your relationships to your confidence, is a mirror of the beliefs, ideas, and mental habits that are running inside your subconscious mind. You are not experiencing life as it is. You are experiencing life as you are internally conditioned to experience it. Internal programming, also known as a paradigm, is a collection of beliefs and habits that were formed through repetition and emotional impact over time. These ideas were passed down from family, culture, environment, education, and early experiences. Most of them you did not consciously choose. You inherited them, accepted them, and they became embedded in your subconscious without resistance. This programming shapes how you think, how you feel, and how you act. And since your actions produce your results, it's easy to see why your current circumstances are not the result of your potential, but rather the result of your conditioning. For example, if you've been programmed to believe that money is hard to earn, that belief will influence every decision you make around finances. You may hesitate to ask for more, undervalue your skills, or avoid opportunities that require risk. If you've been conditioned to believe you're not good enough, that belief will show up in your relationships, your career, your health. It will silently shape your behavior in every moment, even if you're unaware of it. And no matter how many goals you set or how many hours you work, if your internal programming contradicts the results you desire, you will always find yourself stuck in the same loop. This is why it's not enough to simply want more or do more. Wanting doesn't change programming. Doing without changing the thinking behind it often leads to exhaustion and minimal results. What must change is the mental blueprint. You have to rewrite the story running inside. That begins with awareness. Start paying close attention to the thoughts that automatically arise when you think about success, money, love, health, or any area of life where you feel blocked. What do those thoughts sound like? Where did they come from? Are they really true? Or have they just been repeated so often that they feel true? Your results are not lying. They are honest feedback from the universe, reflecting the frequency of your dominant thoughts and beliefs. If you want to know what you truly believe, don't look at your intentions, look at your results. The subconscious mind accepts what is repeated with emotion. So if you've been telling yourself stories of limitation, fear, and doubt over and over again, that programming is what's running the show. The outer world simply matches it. This is not a cause for frustration, it's a gift. Because if you created your current results through programming, you can create new results by changing that programming. That means you are not stuck. You are not bound by your past. You are not limited by what others have told you. But change begins inside. You must become a conscious thinker. You must start observing the automatic responses and habitual thoughts that drive your day-to-day life. You must ask again and again, is this thought aligned with the result I want? If it's not, then it's time to reprogram. Reprogramming the mind requires repetition and emotional involvement. This is not a one-time act, it's a daily practice. It involves feeding the subconscious new ideas, new affirmations, new images that support the life you want to create. Visualization, affirmations, self-talk, and environment all play a role in installing a new program. The key is consistency. The old programming didn't get there overnight, and the new one won't take hold overnight either. But with persistence, the new ideas begin to take root, and once they do, your behavior and results start to shift naturally without struggle. One of the most powerful tools in reprogramming is visualization. When you visualize the result you want with emotion and clarity, you're communicating directly with the subconscious. You're giving it a new blueprint to follow. The mind responds to vivid images. It doesn't care whether they're real in the physical world yet. If you continue to impress the image of success, of abundance, of confidence onto your subconscious, it begins to accept it. And once the new program is accepted, it will express through your actions without resistance. Another key is to become intentional with your self-talk. Words are programming. The things you say about yourself to yourself are not just casual, they're commands to your mind. When you say things like, "I'm not good at that," or "I always mess this up," or "this never works for me," you're reinforcing the old program. Even if you say it jokingly, your subconscious doesn't know the difference. It accepts everything you say and turns it into action. That's why speaking in alignment with your desired results is not just motivational, it's necessary. Say what you want to believe until it becomes real. Speak it even when you don't feel it yet, because that's how the new belief begins to grow. Your environment also plays a massive role in shaping and reinforcing your programming. The people you surround yourself with, the conversations you engage in, the media you consume, all of these are inputs that affect your subconscious. If you spend time in environments that reflect scarcity, negativity, and limitation, those ideas will continue to dominate your mental space. But if you place yourself in environments of growth, abundance, belief, and encouragement, your mind will begin to shift. Choose wisely. Your future depends on the information you allow in. Habits are also reflections of programming. Most of what you do each day is done without conscious thought. The way you wake up, the way you speak, the way you respond to challenges, these are patterns. And these patterns are aligned with your internal script. To change your results, you must change your habits. And to change your habits, you must change the beliefs that drive them. This is not surface-level change. It's deep foundational work. It requires honesty, discipline, and the willingness to let go of familiar but limiting patterns. The beauty of this process is that as you change the programming, the effort becomes lighter. Things that once felt like a struggle begin to flow. Actions that once required force become natural. That's because your internal world is no longer resisting the new results. It's aligned with them. And when your thoughts, beliefs, and actions are in harmony, success is no longer a distant goal. It becomes the inevitable outcome. Repetition and belief create lasting change. This principle is the foundation of all transformation, whether in mindset, behavior, or results. The mind does not change through a single burst of inspiration. It changes through repeated exposure to a new idea, combined with belief in that idea. This is how your original programming was formed, and it's how new programming is installed. The subconscious mind learns through repetition. It accepts what is consistently presented to it, especially when that information is delivered with emotion. Repeating a thought, a statement, a vision over and over again with belief is how you etch that idea into your subconscious. And once it takes root, it begins to express itself through your behavior and ultimately your results. Every belief you hold today was once just a thought you accepted. You may not even remember when it started. Someone said something to you, or you experienced something emotionally intense, and that moment repeated enough times or felt powerful enough to become a belief. Over time, the belief turned into a rule that now governs how you see the world and how you operate in it. Some of those beliefs support your growth, but many do not. The only way to override them is through the same process that installed them: repetition and belief. You must intentionally choose the new thoughts, and you must repeat them consistently until they become your new internal truth. Affirmations are a tool for this process. Repeating affirmations is not about convincing yourself with blind hope. It's about rewiring the internal system. When you say an affirmation like, "I am confident and capable," you might not believe it at first. In fact, your old programming might immediately argue against it. That's normal. The old program is fighting to stay alive. But if you keep repeating that affirmation day after day, morning and night, with feeling and conviction, your mind begins to accept it. The resistance weakens. And one day, without even noticing, you find yourself acting from that new belief. That is the power of repetition combined with belief. Belief is the emotional glue that locks the idea into your system. You can repeat a phrase 1,000 times, but if you don't emotionally engage with it, it will bounce off the surface of your mind. You must feel what you are saying. You must see it in your imagination. You must act as though it's already true. That emotional involvement tells the subconscious, this is important, this matters, this is real. The subconscious responds to emotion more than logic. It doesn't care if the statement is currently true in your outer world. If it feels real inside, it will begin working to make it real outside. This is why repetition without emotion can fail. Many people try affirmations or visualization and say it doesn't work. But if you're repeating something with doubt, frustration, or disbelief, those emotions become part of the message. You're not just repeating words, you're reinforcing the doubt. To make repetition work, you must bring belief into the process. Even if it starts small, even if it feels uncomfortable, you must reach for the feeling of, what if this is true? That opens the door. As the repetition continues, that belief expands, and eventually it becomes a dominant idea. Repetition also builds familiarity. The more you hear something, the more normal it becomes. This is how advertising works. Companies don't try to convince you to buy something the first time you see it. They show it to you again and again, until it becomes part of your mental landscape. The same strategy works in your own mind. Repetition makes the idea familiar. Familiarity lowers resistance. And once resistance drops, the idea is free to move into your belief system. This is why the people you spend time with and the content you consume are so critical. You are constantly repeating ideas to yourself based on your environment. If those ideas are empowering, they move you forward. If they're negative, they reinforce limitation. Your self-image is also shaped this way. How you see yourself, whether confident or unsure, capable or lacking, is the result of repeated internal messaging. Every time you say, I can't, every time you shrink back or avoid stepping into a bigger role, you reinforce a small self-image. To change that image, you must feed your mind new instructions over and over again until they begin to reflect in how you carry yourself. This includes how you walk, speak, dress, and make decisions. All of those behaviors are expressions of your internal image. Shift the internal story through repetition and belief, and the outer expressions begin to shift naturally. There's also a neurological basis to this. The brain forms pathways based on repeated thoughts and behaviors. Every time you think a thought, a pathway is activated. The more often you think it, the stronger that pathway becomes. Eventually, it becomes the default route your brain takes. This is why old habits and beliefs feel automatic. They've been repeated so many times that they've become hardwired. But just like a path through a field, if you stop walking it and start creating a new one, the old path fades. With enough repetition and belief, the new path becomes the default. Your mind begins to travel that road effortlessly. This process requires patience and persistence. You don't build a strong belief in one day, and you don't erase years of conditioning overnight. But the mind doesn't resist consistency. If you keep showing up, keep feeding it the right messages, keep holding the image of the person you want to become, the mind will shift. It has to. The laws of the mind are consistent. What you focus on expands. What you repeat becomes familiar. What you believe becomes your reality. That's why it's not enough to be motivated for a moment. Motivation fades, habits stay. And habits are born out of repetition. When you decide to change your life, don't look for magic. Look for discipline. Commit to repeating the right thoughts daily. Commit to feeling them. Commit to acting in alignment with them. Even when results are slow, even when doubt creeps in, keep repeating, keep believing, because it's not one time that changes everything. It's the accumulation of hundreds, even thousands of small, repeated steps that transform your identity. Even your emotional reactions can be reshaped this way. If you've spent years reacting with anger, fear, or anxiety, that pattern can be interrupted through repetition of calm, grounded, empowering responses. You may not feel them at first, but the more you rehearse the new way of responding, internally or externally, the more natural it becomes. That's the principle at work again. Repetition and belief create change. Not just temporary change, but lasting transformation. Fear of failure is the silent killer of dreams. It doesn't always show up dramatically. Sometimes it hides behind procrastination, perfectionism, hesitation, or even logic that sounds reasonable but is rooted in doubt. Fear of failure whispers, what if it doesn't work? What will people think? What if I lose everything? And while those questions may seem like self-protection, what they're really doing is building a wall between you and your potential. Fear of failure is not just a fleeting emotion, it's a conditioned response, one that's been planted in your mind over years of experiences, influences, and interpretations that convinced you that it's safer to stay small than to risk falling down. The reality is that failure is not the enemy, It's a part of the process. Every successful person you've ever admired has failed, some publicly, some privately, but all have faced the moment when something didn't work, when the outcome didn't match the effort, when a door they expected to open stayed shut. What separates the successful from the stuck is not the absence of failure, but the decision to move through it. Failure only has the power you give it. It is not permanent. It does not define you. It is feedback. It is a teacher. And until you reframe your relationship with it, you will stay trapped in cycles of inaction and limitation, choosing comfort over growth, and wondering why success feels like it's always just out of reach. You were not born with a fear of failure. Watch a toddler learning to walk. They fall over and over again, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but never quitting. They don't doubt their ability to walk. They don't compare themselves to others. They don't worry about looking silly. They simply keep going. Why? Because they haven't yet learned to associate failure with shame. That association comes later, when adults correct you too harshly, when peers laugh at your mistakes, when school punishes imperfection, when media glorifies instant success without showing the messy middle. Over time, you start to believe that failure means you're not good enough, that it should be avoided at all costs, that it's better not to try than to risk not succeeding. That belief becomes a filter through which you see every opportunity. You start to second-guess yourself before you even begin. You hesitate to speak up in meetings, to launch your idea, to invest in yourself, to take bold steps toward your dream. And when you do take action, you hold back just enough to stay safe. You say you're thinking it through, but really you're trying to eliminate all risk. You say you're waiting for the right time, but really you're waiting for certainty. But success never comes to those who wait for certainty. It comes to those who are willing to bet on themselves in the face of uncertainty. This fear also keeps you in the loop of perfectionism. You set unrealistically high standards, thinking that if you can just get everything right, you won't fail. But perfection is a moving target. You'll always find something that's not quite ready, something that could be better. So you tweak and polish and plan, and in doing so, you delay your progress. You hide behind preparation instead of stepping into motion. The irony is that the pursuit of perfection often leads to the very failure you're trying to avoid. Because nothing gets done, nothing gets launched, and you stay stuck in the safety of the known while your goals drift further away. Another masked fear of failure wears is the need for validation. You wait for someone to give you permission to approve your idea, to say, yes, this will work, but no one can give you that certainty. That must come from within. When you seek constant reassurance, you hand your power over to other people's opinions. You become dependent on their belief instead of developing your own. And if they don't believe, or if they doubt you, their fear becomes your fear. You internalize it. You start thinking they must be right. You forget that most people project their own limitations onto others, not out of malice, but out of conditioning. The antidote to fear of failure is not avoidance, it's action. Action is what breaks the pattern. When you act despite fear, you teach your nervous system that failure is survivable. You start to separate the event from your identity. You realize that trying and not succeeding doesn't make you a failure. It makes you courageous. Each time you try, you gather data. You learn what works, what doesn't, where to pivot. You gain confidence, not from things always going right, but from knowing you can handle whatever happens. And eventually, fear loses its grip, because the more you move forward, the smaller fear becomes. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to start welcoming failure as a friend, not because you enjoy it, but because you know it's part of the journey. You expect it, you prepare for it, you use it. That's what high performers do. They don't fear falling, they plan how to get back up. They see setbacks as setups for comebacks. They understand that each failure carries the seed of growth. They don't take failure personally. They extract the lesson and keep moving. That's the mindset that builds resilience. And resilience is more important than talent, intelligence, or even resources. Because resilience keeps you in the game long enough to win. It's also important to redefine what failure really means. Most of the time, what you call failure is simply an outcome you didn't prefer. That's all. It's data. It's not a declaration about your worth. It's not a prophecy about your future. It's just information. And when you start to see it that way, you can look at your so-called failures without shame. You can analyze them objectively. What did I learn? What could I have done differently? What will I change next time? That kind of thinking turns every failure into a stepping stone. It builds wisdom. And wisdom makes you unstoppable. Surrounding yourself with the right people is another critical step in overcoming fear of failure. You need people who see the greatness in you, even when you can't. People who encourage risk, who normalize falling and getting back up. People who don't shame you when things go sideways, but instead remind you why you started. This kind of support system creates a safe space to stretch, to try, to experiment. And the more you surround yourself with people who embrace growth, the more their courage becomes your courage. Environment matters. Energy is contagious. Another layer to this fear is the fear of success disguised as fear of failure. Sometimes you're not just afraid of failing, you're afraid of what will happen if you succeed. Will people treat you differently? Will you be able to maintain it? Will it expose you, challenge you, require more of you? These hidden fears create self-sabotage. You might not even realize it, but you unconsciously pull back right before the breakthrough. You delay the phone call, you miss the deadline, you forget the meeting. It's not because you can't do it. It's because part of you is scared of what doing it will mean. To overcome this, you must bring those fears into the light. Name them, question them, challenge their truth, because most of the time those fears are built on illusions, not facts. Fear of failure is deeply connected to identity. If you believe you are someone who always messes things up, who isn't good enough, who isn't worthy of winning, then failure will feel like proof of that belief. That's why inner work is so essential. You must rewrite the story you tell about yourself. You must decide consciously who you want to be. Then you must begin to act like that person, even if it feels foreign at first. Your actions shape your identity just as much as your identity shapes your actions. And every time you choose to act from belief instead of fear, you reinforce the new identity. One choice at a time, you become the version of yourself that is no longer held back by fear of failure. Discipline is the bridge between where you are and where you want to go. It's the invisible force that turns dreams into reality, not by inspiration, but by consistent, often unexciting action repeated over time. Discipline isn't about punishment or deprivation. It's about alignment. When your actions are in harmony with your goals, when your behavior reflects your vision, discipline becomes a form of self-respect. It's not a restriction, it's a declaration that you take yourself seriously. You value your potential enough to act like it matters every single day. This is the difference between people who wish for success and those who work for it. Discipline is the hinge on which everything else swings. Motivation can spark a fire, but discipline keeps it burning. Most people wait until they feel like doing something before they act. They let their emotions dictate their habits. But the truth is, if you only act when it's convenient or exciting, you'll never build anything lasting. Discipline means showing up when it's hard, when it's boring, when no one's watching, when results aren't instant. It's easy to be committed for a day. It's easy to set goals when you're in a good mood. But success belongs to those who stay committed when the emotion wears off, and all that's left is the decision. Discipline also builds self-trust. Every time you follow through on a promise you made to yourself, you reinforce the idea that you can rely on you. That trust is what builds confidence. You start to believe that if you say you'll do something, it will get done. Not because circumstances allow it, but because you've decided. This is where real power comes from, not from controlling the outside world, but from mastering your inner world, from knowing that no matter what happens, you have the character to show up and do what needs to be done. That kind of person doesn't need motivation. They don't need hand-holding. They don't need perfect conditions. They've trained themselves to rise, and they rise by choice, not by mood. This kind of discipline doesn't happen by accident. It's developed like a muscle. You start small. You keep your word on little things, waking up when you said you would, completing the task you said you'd finish, sticking to the plan when distractions pull at you. Each small act of discipline strengthens your ability to act in alignment with your goals, and over time, these small wins compound. They become habits, and habits become your lifestyle. The things that once required effort start to feel automatic. That's how transformation happens, not in a moment, but in a series of moments where you chose discipline over comfort. Discipline also simplifies your life. When you're clear on your goals and consistent in your actions, you don't waste energy on indecision. You don't wrestle with whether or not to do what you said you would. You don't negotiate with yourself in the mirror every morning. You've already made the decision. You just execute. This clarity and structure free up mental space. They reduce anxiety. They eliminate the chaos that comes from living reactively. With discipline, you don't need to rely on willpower constantly because your systems support you. You don't have to decide every day whether or not you'll work on your dream. It's already part of your routine. Many people confuse discipline with rigidity, but real discipline is rooted in purpose, not pressure. It's flexible where it needs to be, but it's unwavering in direction. You don't beat yourself up for missing a step. You correct and continue. You don't strive for perfect behavior. You strive for aligned behavior. And the more you operate from alignment, the more natural discipline becomes. It stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like clarity. You're not forcing yourself, you're following through. You're not dragging your feet, you're leading your life. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It's the foundation of it. The most successful people aren't the smartest or the most talented. They're the most disciplined. They've trained themselves to act in their best interest even when they don't feel like it. They've learned to delay gratification, to prioritize long-term reward over short-term comfort. That's what separates the average from the exceptional. It's not just what you do, it's what you consistently do. Anybody can be great for a moment, but those moments don't matter if they're not repeated. Discipline ensures that greatness becomes your standard, not your exception, and discipline is contagious. When you begin to live with focused intent, people notice. Your energy changes. Your results speak. You inspire others without saying a word. Discipline commands respect, not just from others, but from yourself. It gives you a sense of pride that no external achievement can replace. Because you know you earned it. You didn't shortcut. You didn't fake it. You built it from the ground up with effort, integrity, and consistency. That kind of success is unshakable because it's rooted in who you've become, not just what you've done. There's also a deeper spiritual layer to discipline. When you commit to a path and walk it with consistency, you send a signal to the universe that you are ready, that you are serious, that you are not waiting for things to fall into place. You are aligning yourself with what you want. This alignment creates momentum, and momentum draws in the right people, opportunities, and resources. Not because of luck, but because you've positioned yourself to receive. You're not just asking for more, you're becoming the person who can handle more. Discipline makes you magnetic to success because it proves you're ready for the next level. Of course, discipline isn't always glamorous. It's often quiet, unseen, thankless. You'll be doing things behind the scenes while others are distracted. You'll say no when others say yes. You'll be consistent when it's not convenient, but every bit of that sacrifice builds something no one can take from you. Character. Discipline builds a foundation so strong that even when the storms come, and they will, you won't be shaken. Because you've done the work, you've put in the reps, you've trained for this, and while others are scrambling to find footing, you're already moving forward. Discipline also reveals what really matters to you. Because when you're forced to choose where to invest your time, your energy, your focus, you start to see what you truly value. If you say health is important, but you never prioritize it, discipline will call that out. If you say your dream matters, but you don't schedule time for it, discipline will expose that gap. This is not to judge, it's to illuminate. Discipline holds up a mirror. It shows you whether your life reflects your vision or your excuses. And in that clarity, you are given a choice to keep lying to yourself or to realign your behavior with your beliefs. The good news is that discipline can be developed at any stage. It doesn't matter if you've failed before. It doesn't matter if you've been inconsistent. The moment you decide to take ownership, to start again, to honor your word to yourself, that's the moment discipline begins. And from that moment forward, every step you take builds momentum. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be persistent. You don't have to do it all today. You just have to do something today, and then again tomorrow, and then again after that. That's how success is created, not by luck, not by talent, but by ordinary people doing extraordinary things consistently over time. Discipline also rewires your identity. Each time you act in alignment with your goals, you reinforce the belief that you are that kind of person. You stop identifying as someone who struggles and start identifying as someone who executes. You no longer see discipline as something you need, you see it as something you are. It becomes part of your identity, and when your identity changes, everything else follows. You start to choose differently. You attract differently. You operate differently. Discipline is the foundation of all of that. It's the quiet, powerful force behind every breakthrough, every win, every transformation you've ever seen or will ever experience.